Now, the next subject is bound to ruffle a bit of feathers here and there. Living together with your partner before marriage is a big decision to make. I mean, it comes with its advantages and disadvantages, of course. It may seem like a good way to test out what it would be like to be married to another person, but it's much more complicated than that. We are exploring the rising trends of cohabitation, also known as fat and sit. Such arrangements have become increasingly common in our country during the past few decades, being led by changing social views, especially regarding marriage, gender roles and religion. Attorney Alan Jose joins us to discuss the implications of this type of relationship. Alan, thank you so much and a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, first of all, do you support this concept of cohabitation arrangement?
I don't think it's really whether I support it or not. As an attorney, I deal with whatever facts are put in front of me. There's a lot of advantage to cohabitation. The nice thing about cohabitation is you don't have laws forced upon you that you don't want forced upon you. You know, a lot of people decide not to get married because they don't want to be bound by the laws of marriage, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
And like you were saying in the introduction, it's a way of getting to know each other and will you be able to live together.
Yeah.
What you've got to be careful of, however, is, and I've seen it before, where people cohabitate. They live together for a long period of time, years in fact, sometimes before they get married. And then the relationship falls apart and they need to go their separate ways. Then the question is, what now?
Yeah.
Who gets the assets? Who gets the house? Who is their maintenance obligations? And the short answer is, there's no legal obligations between the parties. It often becomes a problem.
And what are the main contributing factors to cohabitation?
Well, in South Africa, a lot of people talk about common law husband and wife. It's a term that I hear a lot. There's no such thing. It doesn't really exist in our law. So if you live with somebody, you're entitled to do so. But there's no rights or obligations that arise out of cohabitation. For example, if you are married as a husband and wife and you go your separate ways, you'll get divorced. We've got the Divorce Act, we've got the Maintenance Act, we've got the Matrimonial Property Act, all things that legislate and decide what happens then. Who pays maintenance? How much maintenance is paid? Does maintenance have to be paid? Who gets the furniture? Who gets the house? If you cohabitate, there's no legislation that deals with that whatsoever. So you can sit with the situation which often happens where one of the parties, normally the more wealthy one of it, and unfortunately still more often than not the man in the relationship, the house is in his name, he's bought the furniture, the lady in the relationship hasn't worked perhaps, or she works for a low salary. Now they go their separate ways. She ends up walking away with nothing. She's got no right to claim maintenance. She has no claim upon the house. She's got no claim upon the furniture. So he's got a house and furniture and he carries on. She leaves with nothing.
Now, Ellen, you will agree with me that laws change every now and then. So what sort of rights does a partner have in a cohabitation arrangement?
Well, the South African government did bring in what's called the Domestic Partnership Bill. It's a piece of legislation that's been written to assist people in those situations. Okay. It's been around for probably 10, 15 years. It's never been passed, so it's not law. It's of no value.
Right.
There was a lot of case law that came in to particularly protect, for example, same-sex marriages, because originally...
Just to interrupt you there, should the bill be passed, would that legalize cohabitation arrangements?
Effectively, it doesn't legalize cohabitation relationships. Keep in mind, cohabitation relationship is not illegal. You can live with whoever you want for as long as you want in any arrangement that you want.
Okay.
You can, in fact, enter into a contract where you say, well, we're not going to get married, but we're going to agree to live under certain circumstances. One party will contribute something to the relationship, someone will contribute something different, and it will even agree on what happens if the party splits up. If there's no contracts in place, so there's nothing to enforce.
Okay.
So the Domestic Partnership Bill, what it'll do is saying is, right, if you've been living together for a certain period of time, and if you meet certain criteria, the criteria basically is that you've lived together in the same place, that there's a certain level of intimacy between the parties, and that the relationship has been durable and stable. So it's gone on for a long period of time and they've stayed together for a long period of time.
Okay.
Then you'll get certain protection. But until the Domestic Partnership Bill is passed, there's no protection for parties who just live together.
So if a child is involved, do the rights change?
Nothing changes between the two parties, but the child is protected.
Okay.
We used to have what's called the Natural Fathers of Children Born Out of Wedlock Act. It was a nice long term, and that protected fathers to give them rights when a child was born out of wedlock. Because before, in our common law, the father had very few rights. The Children's Act has now replaced it, Section 21 of the Children's Act in particular. So that gives the father rights with regards to the child, a right to have relationship with the child, to have contact with the child, etc. The child has always been protected. The child has a right to have a relationship with the parents. The child has a right to claim maintenance from both parents. So the child is protected in those circumstances, but there's still no obligation between the two parties in the relationship, only for the child, not for the two parties.
So when does a relationship qualify to be called a cohabitation arrangement? For how long should a couple live together in order for that relationship to be qualified as Fatin said?
Well, our law hasn't defined that. There's no law that defines it. The case law hasn't really defined it, and every case is judged on its particular circumstances. So it will depend on how long have they been living together. Has it been a stable relationship? You know, has one party moved out, or have they had other parties? Is it a monogamous relationship? There's no third parties involved. Are they living in the same home? What is the level of intimacy between the parties? And again, every relationship or every couple's circumstances would have to be judged individually. There's no hard and fast rule one way or the other.
So since the bill hasn't been passed yet, so what happens if one partner passes on? Who benefits from the estate?
That would depend on the party who's passed on's will. So if a man and a woman lived together and the man passed away and he didn't make any provision for the lady in his will, she would inherit nothing. She would get absolutely nothing. Right. If he, however, if he in his will said, I leave everything to my partner, well, that's fine. She would get everything that he has. Okay. Certain pension funds do make provision, therefore, in that if you can prove, if the lady who in the relationship with the man has passed away and has a pension fund, if she can prove that she's dependent upon him, that he supports her and has supported her for a long period of time, the pension fund will support the dependent party. Okay. And certain circumstances, the Workmen's Compensation Fund. Okay. Also, if someone passes away while on work and is covered by the Workmen's Compensation Fund, if you can prove that you were dependent on that person, then you can put a claim in.
Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but in conclusion, from a legal perspective, how would you advise a couple who are in a cohabitation arrangement, or those who intend to get into a cohabitation arrangement?
My advice would be, if you're not planning on getting married and you're going to cohabitate for a long period of time, sit down and draft an agreement, a contract between the two of you, deciding on who contributes what, and if the relationship falls apart, who gets what.
All right. Ellen, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for
your
insight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, more couples are opting for Fatin Set rather than marriage. We just spoke to attorney Ellen Jose on the legal implications of cohabitation relationships. Let's go for coffee now, shall we?